Today we're looking at Noodler's Green Marine. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Robert Oster's Green Marine is a green-ish ink. It's green-ish. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different nib. Words! To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. That's it. Then I put it into a fountain pen Revolution with their flex nib, their Himalaya with the flex nib. I just can't talk today. It's going up just like this. To take my notes for this video, that was completely botched. Before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is this kind of gray to dark green moving up, and then it's this sort of fluorescent green and a very dark green across the top. Now I think that's actually what gives this ink some of its depth and ish in the green color. It is a decent green, but I'm going to go call it an ish just because of how it performs sort of sometimes. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And the line across the bottom is very distinct. It has a lot of hold on there. It is certainly got some resistance in it. We see a very light green, none of the gray pushing up. We see the same sort of neonish green, and then very dark green across the top. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Now, to get a good look at the color, you actually have to be looking over on the side where it has the highlighter, because the bleach, flush, and water went nuts on this piece of paper. Looking at the highlighter, it performed very well with it. We didn't get any, really where the words became garbage and can't be read, so this is a perfectly good green to use for a note taker. Now, water removed much of the green. It left that kind of dark grayish tone behind. Pen flush did a bit more than water did. With only 30 seconds, although it spread like crazy, you can see that it is sort of still held there. Strangely, we get this kind of purpley color underneath, which I don't really see in the chromatography, but it is showing up against pen flush. It just could be a chemical reaction to the ammonia. Bleach does not obliterate. This looks like a very resistant, it will fight you to stay around type of ink. To me, all this means is that I want to experiment with a less expensive pen before I put it into my, $800 pens and perhaps stain. Now, I don't know that staining is going to be a problem. I haven't seen staining being a problem with this ink. However, I would recommend that you experiment with it first as a sample and in a more inexpensive pen before you just rush out and throw it in your expensive pen. Based on that bleach, I have a feeling you might need a little bit of bleach to get it out of there. For the inks I've tested, I found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Noodler's Green Marine has a viscosity of 2.03, making it a faster ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairfontaine, Tomoy River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Noodler's Green Marine has an average dry time of 15 seconds, making it normal. Yep. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing sample consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 offers no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine, had to get some water from my Miss Piggy glass. The extra fine, it's a noticeably lighter tone. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It's too dark a green for me. 10 seconds to dry. Medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It took 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed no color variation. We didn't get any. The smear test says you can likely recover it. Tomoe River. Tomoe River gives, well, it looks like it's really seeping quite heavy in there. It didn't bleed through. It looks like it's wanting to start to bleed through. And this is the extra fine at the top. It didn't bleed, but it went deep into this page. Now, of course, we have show through because it's Tomoe River. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It is so dark, it's like a black. Noticeably lighter tone for the extra fine with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 16 seconds to dry. It's a super dark green here. Medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade. It's a noticeably lighter tone. 23 seconds to dry. It's really lackluster as a color. Sometimes I just feel like when an ink manufacturer makes something and it just really is, they should just sort of like hide it and not let anybody know. And that's where I sort of feel about this one. I really don't like this particular green. Scrubby shows us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. Smear test says you can't recover it. So looking at Rhodia. Rhodia gives no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It's such a dark green. It's that. No, it's green. It's not black. Dark green. Extra fine, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade. And a very, very dark green that's dull to look at. 11 seconds to dry. Medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen. We do get some spots of shading. Quick shows us some nice shading. It starts darker, gets lighter, gets darker on the right. Brown shows us some nice shading. Starts darker, gets lighter. Fox starts light and gets dark. So the medium on the Rhodia looked nice. It looked nice there. I'm going to give it that. 15 seconds to dry. The extra fine showed us no color variation on the scrubby. We didn't get any. Scrubby of the medium showed us color variation. We did get color variation. I see more in person. You have to look far left to far right to be able to see it on camera. Smear test, you can likely recover it. What happens if I give it some yellow background? Yellow Rhodia paper. No bleeding, no ghosting, which was really expected at this point. It is still Rhodia paper. How about the tone? 1.1, unaffected. Extra fine, unaffected. Medium, unaffected. That's because Noodler's does make some saturated inks. If you're one of the people that likes to really water down inks, maybe this is an ink that you need to water down. I don't care for this ink. When I do my samples and I go through and I really don't like, I have a bag that sits aside that I put my I'm not returning to it sample. This goes in my I'm not returning to it sample. I just don't see a need to actually use this sample up. Extra fine, no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer little bits of shading, not very much. You sort of have to seek out a spot. O of over is slightly darker or slightly lighter than the rest of over. E and the is slightly darker than the rest of the super dark the. 11 seconds to dry. I don't really want to call this shading. You might. Medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does offer some shading. Quick does the same thing where it starts dark, gets light, gets darker again. Brown starts dark and gets light again. Over starts light, gets dark, 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 dark. 15 seconds to dry. Scrubby of the medium shows us no color variation. We did have a couple spots with some color variation. Scrubby of the medium shows us some color variation. We did get some color variation. Again, look far left to far right to see it. Smear test, you can likely recover it. White lines paper. It bled.
It didn't bleed through. It didn't touch the page underneath. A lot of bleed very deep into it. The interesting thing to me is it's deeper on the extra fine than it is on the medium. The medium just has a lot of ghosting. This is spotting onto the other side of the page. It didn't touch the other page. It's just starting to spot. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It's a much nicer green with the gray White Lines paper. It's a much nicer green. Extra fine, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 5 seconds to dry. The medium had the same story, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It took 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby of both showed us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. And the smear test says you could likely recover it. You just can't use the back side of the page. So this is Strathmore writing paper. Other than the scrubby where I put it on stupid thick, we get no bleeding. So we have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, ew, that color, ew. 1.1, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and ew, that color's gross. Extra fine, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The tone is much nicer. It's pleasant here. It's ew here. And that's what I get a lot with this ink. When it goes down thicker, heavier, and darker, it's gross. When it goes down lighter, it's nice. It's a pleasant tone then, not when it's on thick. 4 seconds to dry. The medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us no color variation. We got no color variation. The smear test says you likely can recover it, but this is a correspondence paper. If you smear like that on your correspondence, please write them a new letter. And that's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Noodler's Green Marine, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I'm going to butcher this name, but I've chosen Krishna's Manavadam, Manavadame. It's an orangey red ink, and I think these orangey reds with this type of green look great, despite my butchering that name in every way possible. And I'm sorry to Krishna for that. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So, what do I think of Noodler's Green Marine? In wetter, broader nibs, the ink loses a lot of its character as a green. It becomes much less interesting. Very dark, could pass in a professional environment if they use decent paper. I just didn't really enjoy it in broader, wetter pens. But in a finer, drier pen, the green is going to come through much nicer, much more acceptable is the word I would use. Not that it's great, but it is definitely acceptable. Thanks for watching.